Hello, everybody! Welcome to Kevin Plays Disc Golf. Today we have a playthrough and course review from the Hollows South Disc Golf Course in Manchester, New Hampshire. My name is Kevin, and I play disc golf. Filming on course for this video was done on October 12th, 2024. There are a couple different options of how to get to the course depending on exactly where you're coming from. If you're coming from the north, you'll be traveling on Interstate 293 South. Take the exit to continue on Route 293 South and join Route 101 East. Do not continue straight onto the Everett Turnpike. If you're coming from the west on Route 101, continue on to Interstate 293 South. If you're coming from the south on the Everett Turnpike, take the exit onto Interstate 293 South and 101 East. From where 101 and 293 come together, take the first exit, exit 2, onto Brown Avenue. You will want to take a left in the opposite direction of the airport. If you're coming from the east via either Interstate 93 or Route 101, go onto Route 293 North at the southern end of I-293 to exit 2, Brown Avenue, and then take a right at the off-ramp. There is a bit of an odd intersection at the first light after going under I-293. You'll want to be in the left lane to continue straight on Brown Avenue. After about a quarter of a mile, you'll see the parking lot for the Hollows South Disc Golf Course on the left. If you are playing the full 36 holes, I would recommend starting on the north course, as there's a much shorter walk from the parking lot to T1 and from the basket of 18 on the north course than the south course. You can see the link to my review of the Hollows North Disc Golf Course in the description. If you'd like to practice, there is a practice basket and net set up on the walk from the parking lot to the hole 1 tee. I played the course in early fall and it was relatively dry. There are several places where I would expect the ground to be muddy and the creeks and gullies have more water in them in the spring or after heavy rains, which will increase the chances of a lost disc in those locations. I mentioned these in the playthrough on the individual holes where that may happen. I would recommend a pair of hiking boots if you think the ground might be wet in places, as there are many places where it can get muddy, much more so than on the north course. Rules regarding alcohol and tobacco are unclear. If you know for sure, post in the comments below. There were trash cans and a porta potty in the parking lot when I played, however there were not any on the course. Please carry out all trash that you bring in. Dogs are allowed, however must remain leashed and they must be cleaned up after. The disc golf course is the primary use for this facility. Everyone I saw in the park was there to play disc golf. Both the north and the south courses do have tournaments relatively frequently, so it is best to check before you go if you're playing on a weekend to make sure the course is not being used. I'll have my overall review of the course at the end of the video. Be sure to post your comments as to your thoughts of what looks fun and where you think the problem areas are. Now we'll go to the parking lot to see how to get started on the course.
Alright, hello everybody. It is Saturday, October 12th, and here we are at the Hollows Disc Golf Course South. Here's the parking lot. It's a little bit easier to get into the parking lot at the south than it is at the north. I'll have a couple links to the north course here. So, from the parking lot, as you can see, there's a big open area. Just to the left of the entrance to the parking lot, there's this kiosk. And just beyond this kiosk to the left is the sign for the first tee, and that is where we are going to want to go to begin our round. So today it is a beautiful fall morning as we continue our way down there. The only issue is that, as you might be able to see or hear, it is quite windy here today. It's actually the windiest I've played in a while, so I'm going to apologize in advance for all the wind noise. Hopefully once we get down into the course itself, which is pretty much all wooded, that hopefully the wind noise will die down and hopefully the wind won't be too bad. There have been a couple other times where I've played this year where going into the woods, in the woods itself, it hasn't been that bad, even though there has been a lot of wind out in the open. So as we move down here, Continuing along this path, here we have a practice tee, or practice basket, and throwing net, just a little warm-up area. I want to partake of that, which I should probably do. Alright, so as we continue down the path from the practice basket and net, have a nice little bridge. Again, my suspicion is that it is going to be quite marshy here in the spring. I played the North Course a week ago and there was some mud. It's about the same level of dry right now, though it is supposed to rain significantly tomorrow. But my guess is that this is going to be all wet mud in the early spring especially, and maybe even in the mid-spring and summer. They do have some nice bridges here. This is probably the longest journey from where we parked to the first tee that I've seen so far. And here we have the first tee right in front of us. Hole 1 is a 259-foot par 3. Again, I will be playing long tees, long baskets on all of these. It appears that the long tee does not actually exist yet, but they are in the process of making that. They have an area set up to do it, but the tee doesn't actually exist there yet. There is a creek that is out of bounds. It is marked by rope, and it is a significant creek even this time of year that we have to worry about. We've got a couple options. We can either lay up short or go for the pin. I'm probably going to just lay up short just so I don't end up in the creek, because it is more likely that I will end up in the creek with a full power shot, especially with the wind today, than end up making it across. All right, so here we are about 75 feet off the tee at sort of the crest of the little hill. We have a much better view of the bridge and the creek and where the basket is from here. It's a fairly open basket if we can get in there. Again, I laid up just long of here. Did not lay up as far as I would have liked, but at least I'm safe and still have a reasonable opportunity of a up and down from here if I have a decent approach shot. Well, I wouldn't call that a decent approach shot, but at least I'm over the creek and should have an easy 4 from there. All right, I bounced off a couple trees, took a 5 here. Sometimes that happens again, first hole of the day, not too bad. So to get from the basket of 1 to the tee of 2 with our back to the tee, if we look up, we can see the sign for the second tee pointing down this way. And we have another nice little path here. It's a little disconcerting because in addition to leaves falling, there have been a lot of acorns raining down. There are a lot of oak trees here, so hopefully you don't get hit by too many of those. Oh, interesting, we got a set of train tracks right over there. But here we are at the tee for hole 2. Hole 2 is a 511-foot par 4 to the long pin. The long pin is quite a ways down, dogleg right. But the general idea is you want to just get it as far down as you can and hopefully have a reasonable second shot to get over the creek to the pin. The creek also comes into play on this hole and is out of bounds on the second shot. The train tracks are also out of bounds, but the train tracks are way left. You need to get a really bad kick to end up out of bounds left in the train tracks. It's going to be knocked down by the trees and the brush before you get there first. But and the idea here is just pretty much go straight ahead as far as we can get it. Here we are about 200 feet off the tee pad, and we still do not have a clear view of the basket. The basket is, if you look to the right, on the right edge of the fairway, there are 2 trees, large trees that are relatively close to us that are near each other. It's kind of along the left inner edge of that, that's the direction that the basket is. However, there's no real clean shot to the basket until you get at least past the second tree up there, so we need to go, I'd say, at least another 200 feet past here. So really you need to get 400 to get close to be able to see the basket. The creek on the right side is definitely in play, and there is a lot of water there even now. So again, for disc safety, I'm more concerned today about not losing any discs here, especially on a hole like this, than I am about necessarily getting a good score. So here we are on the left side of the fairway, about, I'd say about 350 feet up, maybe even a little bit further. We can go all the way to the edge of the fairway. Here we're looking straight ahead at the basket. The creek, though it is there, it's not nearly as deep or mucky up here. So yes, it would be out of bounds, but at least I'm much less concerned about losing a disc from up here. So again, the further up, the more gap options you're going to have. I'm just behind where we're standing. So after my third shot, and I'm playing with my rock so far, because it is the most replaceable disc I have. So that gives you an idea of kind of what I'm doing here. So I'm okay getting a little bit more aggressive this far down. I'm still not quite sure exactly how I'm going to do this yet. I may actually try and go for the green, so I've got a shot that I may be able to get to the green from here with. Or I could get a lucky skip off the bridge. So that went off a tree, off the bridge, and I have probably about a 30-foot putt for what would be my 5 from there. So here we are looking back at the tee. You can see it's quite a ways down there. Sort of that small tree that's sticking out a little bit on the right side. Not the one that's more in the fairway, but the one that's tucked in a little bit and a little bit closer. That's where I just took my shot from that area. So as you can see, as we swing around, we are right next to the bridge, and there's probably another 30 feet past the bridge that we can go. And if you make it to the bridge, it's a clear shot at the basket, and the creek and out of bounds come into play, or are out of play. If we take a walk across the bridge here, we can see that there is the rope marking out of bounds. So it's nice to have that. It is at least a good chunk of the way up there along the left side. If we look in the creek itself, we can see right now it's not much of a creek, but again, my guess is in the spring this is going to be pretty deep. And we ended up right at the edge of the bridge, inbounds. You can see here is the out of bounds rope marker right there. So we managed to stay inbounds, and let's see if we can make a miracle putt for 5 from here. No, that will be a drop in for 6, but again, here I have all my discs, so I will take that. All right, with our back to the bridge to get from the second basket to the third tee, if we just go past here a little bit, we can see the sign for the third tee. And right here we have the tee pad for hole 3. Hole 3 is a 195-foot par 3, dogleg right. It does go significantly uphill and to the right after the corner, and the pin is a long way to the right. The creek on the left is out of bounds, and if you happen to be playing from the long tees, this is the first course I've been playing from the short tees, and mostly because so far this is the first hole with a long tee that I have found. It's just on the other side of the bridge from the walk here, and you literally have to walk over it to get to the short tee. So here again, the creek left. As a right-hand, forehand predominant player, this hole kind of suits my game, but it is way far off to the right. Like even here, I don't know if I can get to the pin because of how far right it is. We don't want to be left because that's where the creek is. don't want to be long. We just want to somehow get way, way right. Yeah. To give you an idea of how far right it is, it's actually so far right that it's going to be on the direction to the pin is either off camera to the right or just barely on the edge of the camera. It is way, way out there. Well, not what I wanted, but I'm straight ahead and safe, so I should have a good look at 3 from there. Here we are looking back at the tee, and I'm pretty much just straight off the tee in this nice little landing zone here. If we were playing the short pin, I'd have a putt for birdie from there, so that's where the short pin is. But the actual long basket is still quite a ways up there. I've got probably a 70 or 80 foot shot from here, but it is open from where I am, so this is kind of a conservative 3 from this hole. Finally, not a double bogey on a hole. I did have about a 10-foot drop in for 3, so I'm pretty happy with that here. So with our back to the creek, sort of from where the landing area was, where I took my second shot from, if we continue past the basket and we continue on this path, we have the sign for the 4th tee right there. And as we move on a little further, I'm going to take the left branch of this path. And here we have the tee for hole 4. Hole 4 is a 305-foot par 3, slight dogleg left. If we are standing on the very right front corner of the tee pad here, and we can see the basket sort of tucked in on the left side there. The creek is out of bounds. The creek is about 100 feet out and is not deep, so even if you end up there, it's not a big deal, but it really shouldn't come into play. This is probably the most standard hole that I've seen here so far. It's got a nice shot shape, some trees to avoid, and a couple of options here. But this one, from here, it's pretty obvious to see where you're going. So from the short tee pad of 4 to get to the long tee pad, there is, through that little stretch there, the tee pad is just between those 2 trees on the other side of that small path. And where we took a left to get to the short tee, if we had sort of bared right, there is a tee pad there for the long tees. Here we are looking back at the tee through what would be the left gap at the tee. You can see the bridge in the middle of the fairway. If we turn around here a little bit, the short pin is right there. My second shot ended up there, and there is the pin we're going for. Something that I did not catch earlier is that beyond the basket long is out of bounds. It's about 30 feet past the basket, but the ground does drop off pretty sharply and into that same creek if you're long out of bounds, so just be aware of that as well. Here's a little bit better look at the out of bounds line and what you're looking at if you go long. So yeah, it's actually a really steep drop off down to the creek back there. So again, here long is a pretty big lost disc threat. It's probably a solid 25 feet down to the bottom from there, and my guess is it is quite wet. This is pretty much directly past the basket. If we're right of the basket, yeah, we can see a little bit better here how far down it is and what we're looking at getting there. So yeah, the out of bounds here is justified. You do not want to be long. Here we are looking back at the tee for hole 4, and we have the basket just to our right with the out of bounds behind us. If we look to the left, we have the 5th hole tee sign, so we can follow that, and there is a path moving through here to the left. And right here we have the long tee pad for hole 5. And just ahead of that, we have the short tee pad for hole 5. Now, for various reasons, I'm decided I'm going to play the short tees here today, mostly because the signs aren't really set up for the long tees. I could not find the long tees on the first 2 holes. I didn't like the higher chance of lost discs, especially on holes 2, 3, and 4. So basically everything so far of going from the longer tees. So here, if we're looking for the longer tees, it's a narrow gap, and you can see there's a lot of rough and brush in there that you could lose a disc in on that side by bouncing off those trees, because you have to hit that gap to go in there. So here I'm playing decided I'm going to play the short tees for this course just for disc safety. Hole 5 is a 254-foot par 3, dogleg right, significantly uphill. There is out of bounds on the left, and you do not want to go out of bounds here. The direction of the basket is if we see the tree that's off in the distance a little bit, not this V-shaped tree, but the one that's further up, that's lit up by the sunshine. That's the direction of where the basket is. We do have a gap there ahead of us, but we need to go right through, after we go through that gap to get close to the basket. The out of bounds does narrow down significantly up there, so the fairway gets narrower, and we do not want to be long or left out of bounds here. I'll show you why here shortly. Well, here we are looking back at the tee from the left edge of the fairway, just next to this very large tree. We have the out of bounds rope going around this tree and kind of along the gully back there. You can see, again, there is a huge drop off to go into that creek. Right now it's just damp, there's not much water in there. There is enough that it's going to make it may make it hard to find a disc, but my guess is in the spring that a disc in there is gone. And then if we turn around here, we can see the basket right in front of us. And again, the ground does slope away pretty steeply to the left and out of bounds going into that creek. So this is very much a touch shot to get it anywhere close to the basket, and you just, again, have that risk of rolling left going out of bounds. So that's something we definitely need to be aware of from here. Well, I guess being super conservative does have its advantages sometimes. So I have pretty much a drop in here for my par 3. So let's see what we can do here. POV par putt. Hooray, we'll take that. So to get from the basket of 5 to the tee of 6, we can take a left, so continue up the trail past the basket of 5 in the direction of the fairway. And if we take a little left here, you can see we have the sign for the 6th tee up there, but we can take this little shortcut path here first. And we come down this path. And here we have the short tee for hole 6. And then if you are playing the long tees, the long tee for hole 6 is just next to where that chair and table are, just at the top up there. Hole 6 is a 278-foot par 3. It is straight ahead, however, we do have a big mound in the way. There is out of bounds short, but as long as we make it up onto that second tier is in bounds, the lower tier is not. No, that was interesting. All right, we do have a long way to go past the basket to go OB long. It's probably a solid 50, 60 feet past the basket, which I guess you could get there, but it's difficult. It's more likely you're going to hit a tree. So from here, the ideal landing zone is going to be on top of that mound, and it's better to be further right than left on top of it. It's probably about 150 to 175 feet to get up onto that plateau. But again, even if you're short, if it goes down to the second plateau, it's safe, and there are a couple options of going around it. So the direction of the basket, because you cannot see it, is you can see that there are a couple of pine trees off in the distance and one smaller tree that's in the midst of those pine trees straight ahead. That smaller tree is directly in the path of the basket. Now the basket is probably a solid 40 vertical feet below the other side of the hill, so I'll give you a better shot of what's up there so you know what you're dealing with. Now to get from the tee to the landing zone, we have to go right and take this little path here. You can go down this path. Obviously we have about a 60-foot gorge in the way that we don't want to walk through, and this sets us around to where we need to go, and follow down this little path here and take a left where this path opens up, and then if we go straight ahead, we can get to the lower tier of the landing zone, or if we take a right here, we can get up onto the plateau. Now, I had a good drive. I missed all the trees, which is good, so my tee shot is quite a bit right. Not sure if we can see it between those couple of two trees there, but we'll take a video from a little further up from the crest of the hill so we can see exactly what we're looking at. So here we are looking back at the tee on the edge of out of bounds on the opposite side. That lower tier is all out of bounds. This second tier, there is a rope here, sort of on the edge, but if you make it up to the second tier where this little road is, you're still in bounds, although if you end up in this area here, you're gonna have a very difficult second shot if you don't make it up onto that plateau. Here we are looking back at the tee from between these two large pine trees that we can look at for the tee. This is, I'm basically standing on a small stump that is right kind of where we want to aim for. And if we turn around, we can see there is the short pin, and down to the left is the long pin. So if we can make it through this gap and go straight, that's ideally what we want. As you can see, it is fairly thin as long as we stay on top of this mound here. Even if we are down taking the lower route around, it's not too bad, though you will have that cluster of trees to try and get around from down there. But I think ideally we do want to be somewhere up here, and better to be further right than left. Here's my putt for a miracle birdie. No miracle birdie, but an easy par from there. So we took our 3 here, which I'm quite happy with. So with our back to the plateau, if we go a little bit down to the right here, you'll see there is the sign for the 7th tee in this direction. So we can follow this path around here. And keep going through. Cross over this little bridge. Continue down this path. Go a little further. All right, and here we have a couple of options. So if we turn to the left, there is the 7th tee. If we want to skip ahead, the 12th tee is up that hill just on the top there, if you want to skip ahead to 12. However, if you're feeling extra spicy and want to continue on, and obviously you'll have this option after hole 11 as well. If we continue straight down the path, so don't go either towards the 7th tee or the 12th tee, but we take this path, and there we have the 11th basket right in front of us. If we take a right here and look up this hill, that is the 10th basket on the north course. So if you're feeling spicy and you want to play the entire 36 holes, if we go up that hill and take a left, we'll see a sign for the 11th tee on the north course. So you could play through 11 all the way back through 10 and rejoin here. So the basket for 18 and the tee for 1 on the north course are relatively close to each other, so there's not a big gap there. But if that's something you're looking to do, we can either do that from here, from hole 6, or after hole 11 would be the two options that I would recommend there. Hole 7 is a 376-foot par 3. Straight ahead, we can see the basket from the tee, sort of. If way off in the distance, we see straight ahead, there are the cluster of 3 trees that are guarding the basket. If you look between the center one and the one on the right, you can barely see the top of the band. Again, the lighting today is actually decent. I'm not sure if you'd be able to pick that up if you were, if it was more sun, or if the sun was coming in from a different direction. But I'll point out exactly where it is. It's again kind of a straight ahead shot. There are 2 creeks, one that we have to go over that's out of bounds, one that's short of the basket, and one that's long of the basket. One other note on hole 7 here is I did try and look for the long tee. It says it's tucked somewhere in that area back there, but I searched for a little bit. I could not find any tee pad out there, so I'm going to assume that that's one that is not placed yet. Here we are just past the creek, looking back at the tee. This is probably a solid 250 feet to get here anyways. There is currently no out of bounds marking, and the creek is completely dry, so I'm not sure what this is going to look like. I would assume at some point there's probably going to be out of bounds marked here, but as it sits right now, I would kind of consider everything in bounds because there's not really a creek here. It's all completely dry. If we turn around from here, there is the cluster of trees near the basket. And if we just sneak out to the side here, we can see how closely tucked in behind those trees that basket is. Right near the green, we can see that the basket is tucked in amongst these 3 trees, and it's pretty close to all of them. So no matter where you are, you're going to end up with having to contend with one of these trees most likely. My second shot actually ended up going a little bit long, so I have a reasonable putt for a par 3 from here. It's a bit of a distance from here, but I at least have a clean shot at the basket with minimal trees in play. I just chained out on the left side. Oh well, I'll take a 4 from there. With our back to the 7th tee, if we sort of go right through the cluster of trees and look up to the right, we have the 8th tee sign. We have this little bridge that we can cross. Keep going to the 8th tee. And we have another little bridge here. And here we are at the tee pad for hole 8. Hole 8 is a 332-foot par 3, dead straight ahead. Again, we're at the short tees here. I went and looked for the long tees. I could not find them. We do have out of bounds left where the railroad tracks are. Again, I think it's going to be difficult to get there because of how far off it is. This is just dead straight shot. If you can hit a 350-foot narrow tunnel shot, you got a possibility at an ace run here. Here we are standing next to the basket, looking back at the tee. Again, it's kind of a straight tunnel shot. the short basket is right in that line as well, so I did stumble across that. I ended up bouncing off a whole bunch of trees, and then with my third shot, I hit the base of the post. So I had to drop in for 4, which I will take. So as we swing around, we can see the basket for hole 8. And if we go to the right, we can see the sign for the 9th tee. Have a couple little bridges that we can use to cross. Again, we are here in the mid-fall, so my suspicion is in the spring these are going to be a lot wetter, a lot more mud here, so the bridges would actually be necessary. And let's try this way. Take the path to the left and continue around. And here we are at the tee box for hole 9. Hole 9 is a 333-foot par 3, no out of bounds. This is another hole where it says the long tee pad is behind and to the right of the hole. I went and looked through some of the brush there and could not find it, but it does look like it could be potential future expansion here. So we can see the basket from the tee. It does play slightly uphill. It's an interesting shot. We have a couple of different options as far as how to get there. The widest option is to go through this gap on the right and then have it move right to left at the end. This would be a right-hand backhand throw. If you're right-hand backhand, this would be throw it with a little anhyzer to get it around those trees and have it drift back, and that's a perfect shot shape to get there. For me, that right-hand forehand, I don't have the distance to get anywhere near there. This is one that I'll be happy to take a 3 and move on. Here we are about 150 feet off the tee in that right fairway gap. We can see from here that even though we can see the basket, there are lots of trees everywhere. There's no real good path to the basket from here. I bounced off one of the trees and ended up here, but at least I'm in the fairway and have a shot. So I'm gonna try to hit the little trail gap and throw a backhand super overstable disc that will hopefully turn left and skip and get to where I have a putt for 3. But more likely I'm going to hit a tree and end up with hopefully a clear shot where I can have a relatively short putt for 4. Or I could have a weak throw, release early and miss the gap entirely, but still have a clear shot at least what should be an easy 4 from there. All right, we'll see if I can make a miracle putt for 3 from here. Something to note is that the ground does drop off. It's probably a 3 or 4 vertical foot drop off behind the basket into a little ditch. It's not going to roll away too far, but if it was flat ground, it would turn a 5-foot putt into a 25-foot putt to make it a lot more difficult. So what's probably the smart play is just to lay up here and take my 4, or I could make a basket run. Well, I'll probably half-heartedly try and airball the basket and end up in the ditch anyway. Or I'll just take the layup play and have a drop in for 4, so I'm okay with that. All right, so we took our drop in for 4, but this is a little bit better view of the area around the basket here. So if we look behind the basket, we do have a pretty good drop off down into a gully. It's going to be annoying if it goes in here, but you're not going to lose a disc or have a 60-foot putt. It's not going to be impossible to make it back from up there. But to get to hole 10 from the basket of 9, with our back to the tee or sort of looking over the cliff there, if we take a right and follow just to the right of this tree line on our left, first up we will see the sign for the 10th tee, and we continue on this path And it looks like we have a good little walk down this path. And here we are continuing on to the tee of hole 10. And here we are. Hole 10 is a 334-foot par 3, dead straight ahead, although the fairway is makes it play as a left to right dogleg. We are at the very back right edge of the tee. If you're on the right edge of the tee, you can see the basket through the gap that's between this front tree and sort of the line of trees just to the left of that. The basket is off in the distance. You can also see it if you're about 10 feet to the left of the tee pad, around from the other side of that line of trees that the basket is just to the right of. You can see the basket to the left side of the same line of trees. So got a couple different options to look for it. So it does play left to right, so right hand forehand, as is my preference, is kind of the way to go, although it's long enough that for me it's going to be tough to get there. It is maybe slightly uphill, but mostly flat. Looking back at the tee through what would be the left gap that you're seeing, the fairway does open up quite a bit to the right side, so it does open a lot, which is good because I am right down there, but I think I'll have at least I have a clear run up, although between those two, I may have to go between those two trees, which will be interesting. But from here, we have another good look up to the long basket. So I had a good approach shot, so we had a drop in for my par 3 here, so I'm pretty happy with that. So with our back to the 10th tee, to get to the 11th tee, we turn to our right, going back up the fairway towards the tee, then we bear left, and continue on down this path here. Nice wide path. We do want to be a little bit careful of making sure that if people are teeing off at 10, that we keep an eye out for flying discs there. And continue on this path here. And right here we have hole 11. Hole 11 is a 343-foot par 3, pretty much straight away. We can't see the basket very well from the height that the camera is at. However, if you're standing on the tee pad, you can see it. If you look at the small tree that's off in the distance in the middle of the fairway, the basket is just to the right of that. I'll point that out in editing. You may be able to catch a glimpse of it through the bushes here, that are in the foreground, but if you're standing up, it's fairly easy to see. Again, sort of a straight shot down the tunnel and then move a little bit right at the end. This is another hole where it says there is a long tee, but in theory the long tee is somewhere in the middle of this brush here, so even if there is one, you would not want to play off it right now. Here we are looking at the tee next to this big pine tree that we have to decide which way off the tee we want to go around it on. My goal was to go left, however I popped the disc up in the air forehand and I ended up in those sort of piles of logs over there. However, something to note here is that it does open up again on that right side out here, and it is fairly open to the basket. So for my second shot, I had to get a little creative. I did hit one of the horizontal branches sticking out of one of the pine trees, sort of straight ahead there, but I at least have a long putt for 3 from where I am. All right, from here I've got about a 40-foot putt for par, so let's see what I can do here. Not even close. At the basket to hole 11, with our back to the tee, we take a left and go past the basket. We can see the sign for hole 12. And here we have a couple options again. This is the last place on the course where if we want to jump onto the north course, we can do that. We have that option. If we follow this path here, if we look over to our right, there is the tee for hole 7. And if we go up this path to the left and then take a left at the top of the hill, that will bring us to the basket for hole 11 on the north course. However, for us playing the south course, if we continue on to hole 12, and if you're coming from the north course, welcome. This is one option of where you could jump on from hole 10 of the north course to 12 of the south course. Take a left, go up this hill. This is a fairly steep hill, but the tee is right at the top of this hill here.
Hole 12 is a 297-foot par 3, very steeply uphill. You do need to throw about 150 to 175 feet to clear the gorge and make it back inbounds. Where it goes inbound is slightly above the tee pad and is marked by the logs on the other side of the gorge. Basket is just over the crest of the top of the hill.
Now that we've safely made it over to the other side off our tee shot, the question is, how the heck do we get there? Well, there is an option to go straight down and through the gully, but I have been told that that is kind of sketchy and not the way to go, and that the other option is to go back down the hill the way we came. So we follow back down this path that we came up, turn to the left here, as if we're going back towards hole 6, back to the basket of hole 6. Follow this path around, go over this little bridge. So this is the creek at the bottom of the gully for hole 12 as well. And where if we were to go right, that would take us to the basket of hole 6. If we go left, that takes us up here into the landing zone of hole 12. This is quite a bit uphill. And again, one of the ideas from the tee shot is you want to get as far up the hill as you can, because the further up you go, the better off you're going to be for your second shot. And if we continue along here and we turn left, this is the landing zone for hole 12. There is rope marking out of bounds here. Well, there is rope marking out of bounds to the left, or that may just be a guide wire to help you get up the hill. But right in front of us is the short line of logs that we can see from the tee pad, and we can look back across and see the tee from here. Great. At the crest of the hill, looking back at the tee, here is the small stump that I mentioned before, and if we spin around, I believe that is the large pine tree on the left off in the distance, and we can see the basket just to the left of that. So where I am here, I'm not sure I can see the basket from where I am, but it's about a 60 or 70 foot putt from where I am, so we'll see what I can do from here. Well, I can make a poor effort that still has a reasonable shot at a 3 from there. right, with our back to the tee at the basket of 12, to get to the tee of 13, we can keep going past the basket to the left. We have the sign for the 13th tee, and then not too far up this path, right at the top of this hill, there is the tee pad for hole 13. Hole 13 is a 268-foot par 3, dead straight ahead. The basket is above and just beyond that little rock wall. The actual height of the basket appears to be slightly below, so it does play slightly downhill. It does look like we do not want to be long right here, but we should be able to get close. Again, it's just pick a gap, go for it, and hope you make the gap that you're looking for. Here we are looking back at the tee with a little rock outcropping right in front of us. If we turn around, there is the basket. The ground does not drop off nearly as much to the right and behind of the basket as it looks like it does from the tee. There's some pretty dense brush over there on the left. So if you miss, you want to be missing to the right side. It's a lot thinner over there and it'll be easier second shot. I am about 20 feet to the left of here, so we'll see if I can make a putt for par. Almost. Again, from about 30 feet, I'll take that as a very reasonable attempt from there. All right, so we took our drop-in 4 at 13, and to get from the basket of 13 to the tee of 14, we just continue to follow this path past the basket and take a brief walk up this direction. And come to the crest of the hill. And here we have the tee pad for hole 14. Hole 14 is a 337-foot par 3 uphill. It is straight away, however, the camera is not tilted. The ground actually does tilt significantly from left to right here. So anything that hits and rolls, it's going to roll down left, and it could end up rolling down a very long ways. So the idea is if we can get to that stump, that large stump that's in the middle of the fairway in front of us, if we can be there and left, that's kind of ideally where we want to be to get a view for the pin on our second shot. So the woods do open up to the left side, so if we can get way up there left and not hit anything, that's ideally where we want to be, is on the left side. Here we are in the fairway of hole 14, looking back at the tee. If we spin around, there is the large tree trunk in the middle of the fairway. If we spin around even further, we are on the left side of the fairway because this is the only place that we can get a reasonable glimpse of the basket. We can't see it from the right side, so ideally here, if we miss or if we are short, we want to be left so we don't go downhill. And it does open up quite a bit here, so even if you are in the trees, you're going to have a shot to be able to get out of here. But it's much, again, if you end up right, you're going to end up hoping you hit a tree or a log or something so you don't end up in oblivion. Up by the green, there is out of bounds in the creek long, but it is a solid 40-50 feet past the basket, so it is difficult to get there. The more pressing issue is, again, if you get a rollaway that goes right, that's where the problem is going to be, is bouncing off the basket and potentially having a rollaway downhill. I have sort of a miracle putt from about 60 feet for 3 here, so let's see what I can do. Well, that'll be safe for 4. To get from the basket of hole 14 to the tee of 15, with our back to the tee at 14, if we turn to our right, And we start going back up the fairway a little bit, but stay on the left side, start going down the hill. You can see we have a sign for the 15th tee there. And we continue downhill. This is fairly steeply downhill, and this may be a little bit treacherous in the spring or if this ground is particularly wet. And in front of us, we have the tee pad for hole 15. While we're at the tee for 15, one thing we do want to take note of is that the tee pad for 16 is just across the way there. So if there's a particularly errant tee shot that bounces off of one of these trees and starts coming at you, you may need to be aware of it. So just be aware of people teeing off at hole 16 while you are playing 15. Also note that that's where our next tee box is. So we're going to go up the hill and then have to basically walk back down this fairway to get to the tee box. Hole 15 is a 223-foot par 3. It is mostly straight, however, you do need to go around the trees and sort of have a sharp right to left hook at the very end. You can see the basket from the tee. If we look to the left of the fairway, we'll see a couple of larger pine trees further up, and the basket is in the middle of that gap to the left that we can see there. That'll be a drop in for 3 from there. So we took our 3. So to get from the basket of 15 to the hole of 16, there is a little bit safer way to get there. So with our back to the tee, if we turn to the left, we can follow this little path here to the 16th tee here. That just gets us out of the way of anybody playing hole 15 immediately. So I think there's still a shot that we could get hit by something, so pay attention, but it would have to be an errant shot, probably bouncing off of a couple trees. So again, not too big of a deal here. And bottom, here we are, back at the tee pad for hole 16. Hole 16 is a 374-foot par 3, significantly downhill, left to right. Though we cannot see it from here, if you're on the left edge of the tee pad and standing up, you can see the basket. If you look through the gap that has these 2 larger pine trees on the right side of the fairway, beyond that there are a few smaller trees off in the distance, and at the end of that gap is the basket. So that's where we're going. If we try and go directly that path, we're going to bounce off every tree in the area. So better bet is to sort of stay to the main fairway and play a shot that moves from left to right. Here from the crest of the hill, we have a better view of the basket. We can sort of follow the path of the small wood bridge at the bottom through that gap and see the basket up at the end of that gap. I bounced off a tree, pulled it left, and am in the brush way left of here, where you don't really want to be in there, but if you can make it anywhere down into that landing zone, then you're going to be good. Here we are at the bottom of the hill, looking back up, so you can see the little bridge in the foreground. I ended up going way off to the left up there. All of those bushes are prickers, so I'm really glad that for the first time in this series, I decided to wear long pants to play today. Otherwise, I would have cuts and scrapes all over my legs. I may still have cuts and scrapes all over my legs, but they'll be less. And then if we turn around, we can see that from here, the path to the basket opens up quite a bit. Again, this is, I think on this hole, if you get 3, you're doing very, very well. All right, so after our 6 on hole 16, again, not playing in the prickers and brambles on the left side of the fairway is not a good idea. There's also prickers long, which I ended up in as well. So to get from the basket of 16 to the tee of 17, we can walk past the basket, over this little bridge, and down this little path. And that brings us to the tee of hole 17. Hole 17 is a 256-foot par 3, dead straight ahead. We can see the basket through the gap on the left side. There are a couple different options as how to get there, but the key here is just miss the trees and figure out how to miss the trees with how you throw the disc, and hopefully you can end up close to the basket. There is out of bounds long here in the creek. I don't know how far that is now. We will get a closer shot of where exactly the out of bounds is from near the basket. Can I save par here after hitting trees on both my first and second shots? Hooray, I finally made a putt for 3. I will take that. The creek long of the basket is marked by rope. It is quite a ways past. It's probably 30-40 feet past. It's outside of circle 1 anyway, so we can see there's the basket. It does drop off a little bit. Right now it's just marsh muck. And something else I'll point out is that the left side of the fairway was also very mush marky coming up here. So again, in the spring it's probably more than just mush, it's probably actually wet. So to get from the basket of 17 to the hole of 18, so here we are looking back at the tee of 17 with the basket, turn around, we can see the out of bounds creek. We keep going past the basket, we have the sign for the 18th tee, and we cross this little bridge. And again, here we can see the out of bounds rope for 17. Continue on past the bridge, take a little walk a little bit further, and just around this corner to the left, we have the tee pad for 18 right in front of us. Hole 18 is a 337-foot par 3, pretty much dead straight ahead. However, avoiding the trees is a little bit of an issue. There are 3 creeks that are out of bounds, one short, which you only need to clear about 90 feet to clear. The second one is the one that comes mostly into play. That plays from about 300 to about 330 feet off the tee, and maybe a little bit less than that. And then there is a creek out of bounds long and to the left, which we'll see what it's like when it's up there. There's also out of bounds on the left side as well that's marked off by rope, which is not mentioned on the tee sign. However, there is quite a bit of rope all the way along the left side. So ideally you want to sort of hit this gap, stay on the right side of the fairway, and try and get it up. If you can get in that 250, 260 range on the right side of the fairway, just short of the second creek, you're in good shape. You'll have a clear shot at the basket from there. All right, so I kicked off a tree on the left side. It bounced over to the right side of the fairway, so I'm short of where I would like to be. There's a log on the right side that you can see from the fairway. I'm short of that, but from right here we can see the basket, and if you see the second bridge going across the second gap, that provides a clear pathway to get to the basket. So even though I have a long way to go here, I actually have a couple different options as far as how to play this, how to get to the basket. Here we are on the second bridge. You can see the creek is dry, but it is a pretty good creek, and there is rope marking the out of bounds. So we took our drop in for 4 and 18. So now to leave the course after our round, we continue past the basket and continue down this path. And if you are continuing on to hole 1, or if you want to play another round, or are playing the loop from the north side, the tee pad for hole 1 is immediately in front of us. So if you want to go again, there you are. Or if you want to continue on and have had enough fun for the day, you can continue on back up this path that we came down initially. Yeah, we'll do a little time-lapse run here since this is the exact same path that we came in on. And now we have returned to the practice net and practice basket. And here we have arrived back at the parking lot.
Though there did not appear to be any active construction on the course, there are several places where the long tees are planned to go in and could be installed. A few of these would just require moving some of the brush around the tee box, but there are several holes where the tee pad is not in place yet. The thumbnail for this course is the crest from just in front of the hole 16 tee looking towards the basket. This is one of the few places where the course opens up into a valley that is mostly green with some color from the changing leaves in the trees above. This is one of the few places on the course where it feels like you've found an oasis as you crest the hill and look in the direction of the basket. My favorite hole was hole 6, even though it is a blind tee shot and a tree tried to attack me on the tee. It is dramatic as you do have to clear the ravine, though as long as you make it about 125 feet, your disc will be easy to retrieve. The steeply downhill second shot that you'll likely be left with requires a gentle touch to stay within a reasonable range of the basket to make a manageable par putt. Though it is a par 3 that is a very tough hole to get a birdie on, a drop in for par is a satisfying result here. My least favorite hole is hole 2. There's a relatively narrow fairway with the trees more dense on the left side of the fairway, but an OB marsh area on the right where a disc that goes there is likely lost. This leads to an issue that a disc thrown slightly too far left can potentially glance off a tree and kick right across the fairway and become lost, even if you are trying to play conservatively. The chance of a lost disc lessens the further down the fairway you go as the marsh turns into more of a creek, but it was enough of a concern that on the first 3 fairway shots I had, I used the disc that was the easiest to replace rather than the one that would be the ideal best choice without the concern of the swamp. The only way that I see to fix this situation of the lost discs would be to remove some of the trees on the left side of the fairway, especially early in the fairway on the first half of the hole. This would reduce the chance of a disc bouncing off the trees on the left side and ending up in the swamp on the right, while providing a safer option on the left side that is more reliable. The first and last holes are critical for introducing the course and leaving the last impression at the end of the round. Hole 1 is a good starting hole that is representative of the character of the course, both for good and bad. There's a blind tee shot with a deep ravine guarding the green that is likely to have a lot of water in it in the spring. This results in a more conservative tee shot than would otherwise be thrown. The long tee would be where I would have preferred to play from if it existed, which is the case on many holes on this course. Hole 18 has many of the same characteristics as hole 1. There's a blind tee shot with a deep ravine guarding the green that is likely to have a lot of water in it in the spring. This results in a more conservative tee shot than would otherwise be thrown. The long tee would be where I would have preferred to play from if it existed, which is the case on many holes on this course. It is an accurate representation of a summation of the course, but it isn't anything that makes you feel good about how you've played. A par feels good here, but it doesn't feel like it requires anything special or spectacular to get a par. For a noodle arm like myself, a birdie is out of the question without a perfect tee shot and draining a 125-plus foot putt. It is one of the better designed holes on the course using the natural features, but doesn't really do anything special to leave the course feeling great about the round. This is another reason to start on the North course if you're going to play the full 36-hole round. Hole 1 North does a better job starting on a positive note, and 18 North does a better job of making me want to come back. On-course navigation can be a challenge here, with the majority of the navigation issues being figuring out where the basket is on the hole. On several holes, I had to walk a good distance to the pin from the tee to figure out where I was going, and had I not happened to let a group through at hole 12, I likely would have gone through the ravine rather than using the path around from the tee. Hopefully you find this video useful to help reduce the number of times you ask yourself, where the heck am I supposed to go when standing on the tee? There are enough blind and awkward tee shots that the edited playthrough portion of this video ended up being 15 to 20 minutes longer than a typical 18-hole course playthrough, including the Hollows North. The only other real areas of concern were that the walk from the parking lot to hole 1 and return walk from 18 back to the parking lot really is that long, and navigating the 6, 7, 11, 12, 10 north area. The signage is very good at a minimum to confirm that you have gone the wrong way. Navigating this course is like finding your way around Chicago on the L, which is their subway system. For the most part, it's pretty clear where you are and how you should get to where you are going, though there is some amount of needing to trust the map. The only time it gets to be confusing and where you could end up going the wrong way is in the middle of everything, but it is at least well marked and there are options of how to get to where you want to go. This course has several holes where the potential for lost discs is high. In addition to hole 2 mentioned earlier, going long on hole 4, left or long on 5, going far left on 6, short or with a bad tree kick on 12, right on 14, left on 16, and the marsh left on 18 if it's wet are all concerns. Many of these locations could start with a relatively good throw, but just get a bad late tree kick and end up gone. This very much affected how I played holes 2, 14, and 16. The lost disc potential of a bad tree kick also led to my decision to play all the short tees, as the first hole with a playable long tee, hole 3, had a very narrow gap between 2 trees where a tree kick from the long tee going left could end up in the creek out of bounds, and on holes 4 and 5, a very dense section of brush has to be cleared, again through relatively narrow tree gaps. The short tee paths are all concrete, consistent, and in good condition. Many of the tee areas also have old wire spools that are used as tables, benches, or both. They're easy to find and of good quality. The long tees, as mentioned earlier, are mostly dubious in the locations where they exist. Adding these in and clearing some of the brush would significantly improve the replayability of the course in most cases. The baskets are dynamic discs baskets with red banding and red baskets. Though these are of good quality and are easier to see in person than they are in the video, I do not think that red is a good color choice here. I understand trying to create different brandings of the north and south courses to make it easier to identify which course you're on if you take a wrong turn, but I think red was not a good color choice to go with. My overall course rating for the Hollow South Disc Golf Course in Manchester, New Hampshire is that I would be willing to drive 2 hours out of my way to play this course for the first time and 1 hour to play this course again. If you were planning on playing the north and south courses as a giant 36-hole round, this would likely go up. I am interested to see what this looks like in the spring and to see how much additional wetness in the ground affects the course, as my suspicion is that it may have a significant impact in some places. I will play this course again, though some of that is the morbid curiosity to see how much more lost disc potential there is and the additional challenges in the course when it is more wet. Hopefully my suspicions are wrong here. Some curiosity is to see if the long tees go in, as some of the long tee locations could make the holes much better if done as well as the short tees are. There are a few other courses within a half-hour drive, and there are only 2 that I have not played, Cambear Memorial Park in Raymond, New Hampshire, and Papa Michael Pines in Allenstown, New Hampshire. I do not believe either of these will be of the quality of the Hollow South, though if the lost disc potential is lower at Cambear, it could give the Hollow South a run for it. The elephant in the room, which I was curious about when I first played, was why the North Course had such a significantly better rating on UDisc than the South Course did. Now I know why. It's a combination of the lost disc potential, a few holes that seem to be shoehorned into limited areas to make the good holes work, such as holes 3, 5, 13, 15, and 17, the large number of blind tee shots making the experience for first-time players worse, and the prevalence of the marshy areas that I expect affect the overall experience if the ground is wet, which the North Course is less susceptible to. That said, the good holes on this course are very good and memorable in a positive way. These include 1, 6, 7, 9, 10, 12, and 18. If the long tees go in, this grade could improve as long as adequate brush is also cleared for the long tee placements. This course can get busy on weekends, so I am most likely to play this course midweek, and it is much more likely that I play the North Course for fun than the South Course. I consider this course roughly equivalent to Birch Park in Amherst, New Hampshire, which I've reviewed previously, link in the description, though the characteristics of the 2 courses are entirely different. However, there is more potential for improvement here than there is at Birch Park. Like, share, subscribe, and if you think I'm a ding-dong, click the notification bell. Also, check out my other video linked here or my disc golf courses of New Hampshire playlist linked in the description.